Hey everyone, it's Richard Metal Fan here, bringing you guys a brand new 2020 album review. As you can see, I'm clean shaven, so I look like I'm fucking 12 years old again. But anyway, that's not what I'm talking about. But I am going to grow back out. I just need to start over. But anyway, we bring you guys a brand new 2020 album review, and today we're going to be looking into the new album from the band Nightwish entitled Human Nature, which was released today through Nuclear Blast Records. Now, you should probably have at least heard the name Nightwish if you're a fan of like symphonic metal, power metal, whatever. Or they're a symphonic metal band hailing all the way from Kiti in Finland that formed in 1996. And I pretty much discovered Nightwish about almost a decade or so ago. I think it was back in, I don't know what year, 2008 or so. Oh, probably 2009. It was somewhere around there, but it wasn't until like a couple years after that where I discovered the band. I've pretty much been a fan. And these guys, like, each of their albums, they still relatively retain the same sort of like epicness and symphonic style, but they also have like different elements, especially like their first album, which came out in 1997, called Angels Fall First, which has a little bit of like a folk metal style to it. But it wasn't until I believe their second album, I mean 1998's Oceanborn, where they established their sound more just symphonic and power metal with less of that folky stuff. And then they put out albums such as 2000's Witchmaster, the 2001 One EP, Over the Hills and Far Away, and then 2002's A Century Child, and then 2004's Once, which in my opinion is probably my favorite Nightwish album. And that was when they had pretty much their established lineup, being Tarja Thun and the Thomas Holopainen on the keyboards, Empu on guitar, or I'm not going to bother pronouncing most of their names, Marco on bass, and Yuka on the drums. But it wasn't until 2005 where the band had a lineup change when Tarja was fired from the band due to, I don't know, was fired or kicked out, I have no idea. But then they brought Annette Olsen and they put out 2007's Dark Passion Play, which is pretty much right around the time when I first really got into Nightwish. That was like the first Nightwish album I've heard. And yeah, I know Tarja fans are gonna get mad when I say that, but I remember seeing the video for Bye Bye Beautiful, and that pretty much got me into the band. And then 2012 or 2011, I don't know, I can't remember what year that came out, Imaginarium, and that was the last album they did with the Annette, and then she left or something, and then they pretty much got their current vocalist now, Floor Jansen, and then they also expanded to become again another member, Troy Donachy, who plays like flutes and also does vocals as well as their bass player Marco. And then it was around the time after that when they were recording their previous album, Endless Forms Most Beautiful, which came out in 2015, and they had a little lineup change. Well, it was Yuka had like insomnia, and so they got Kai Hato from Winter Sun, and of course formerly of Swallow the Sun, but now he's actually an official member of the band. He joined last year. And you know, I saw Nightwish a couple years ago at it was actually their tour kickoff in Atlanta. It was awesome. But with this album, it's actually the band's first double album. Does this album kind of like exceed what Endless Forms Most Beautiful has? In honest opinion, I think it definitely has. Because it has more of that. It's still like the same old Nightwish. Let's just say, I think Floor Jansen on this album compared to Endless Forms Most Beautiful, I feel like she really utilizes her voice more, where it's more just like up there, and just the vocal work in general. It's between her voice and also Marco's singing as well. Well, it does some singing in there, and then also Troy Donachy also does vocals as well. So it's sort of like the three of their voices mashed up great. And guitar-wise, Empu's guitar playing is just tight. The bass I kind of wish was a little bit audible on here. Keyboards, Thomas, this is keyboard playing, it can do no wrong. And Kai Hato, I feel like he's a great fit for Nightwish, and I'm just glad he got the gig. And the flute playing from Troy actually just brings a little bit of that kind of like a folky vibe to it, similar to like the first album a little bit. So without further ado, let's dive this album track by track. Now we start things off with the song Music, which we witness sort of like a different variety of like strange electronic sounds and animal sounds. And then the first percussion arrives, repeating the prehistoric command, tapping on rocks to produce the first music. And after like 2 minutes, the piano appears, and after piano, it's the choir's turn to come into the scene, and then the guitar, and finally a piece that begins with more of a traditional music structure. And then Ford perfectly interprets extremely demanding verses that have required weeks of training, and the song is gaining momentum over the minutes with a crescendo rise. Is and I think it's a great way to start this album. I mean, it's like 7 minutes long, so yeah. Moving on to Noise, which is the first extract of the album, is known as All. It had to be placed in a hot classification of the album. It would have been the first places. It's really a success and a perfect choice. And I'm just amazed at just how this song goes as fast as After Music. That's just me. Anyway, moving on to Shoemaker, which is the song that I had to re-listen to prior or after listening to this album in full. Well, I even hesitated to put it back when I discovered the song later in the album, beginning with the first part with a rather heavy sound, which alternates imposing verses sung by Floor, then a much softer chorus sung by three singers, especially Troy and Marco. And the bass sounds on the pretty strong in the song, one of the few moments you actually hear the bass. And then I feel like we're moving to more like away from like the traditional structure of songs, such as like verse, chorus, this bridge, chorus, and Shoemaker is a good example. While it seems to be the bridge in which takes up the main melody, it turns out it's only one step before the rest of the song, and then violins enter and support the voice who recites a few lines, kind of like from Shakespeare or something. And then Floor takes over and launches her kind of like opera vocalizations like she's never done before in Nightwish, which is a big moment. Anyway, Harvest, which I actually feel like it's the second extract from this album, with Troy as sort of like this lead singer backing with Floor and Marco, and the latter with sort of like a very deep voice. And the title is kind of sounds a little bit radio friendly in the vein of like something from like My Walden, and it's even more inspired but also more complex. And the chorus is very catchy. It's a title that will put you in a good mood when you wake up. But which contrasts with the rest of the album and its sound. It's daring to choose it as a second single because I don't think it represents the main sound of the album, but that's just me. Moving on to the next song on here, which is Pan. The song begins calmly with a nice introduction to the piano, then a big guitar riff takes over, and overall I feel like the song is a bit like the song with the riff from Empu, with the sound that is both very Nightwish but in like a rather heavy atmosphere here with deep bass, and the verses and chorus sung by Floor following one another, changing the tone a little bit from one chorus to another, and the choirs come in to occupy the place in the second part of the song. How's the Heart, which begins with the sound of a heartbeat as this track begins before the flutes of Troy and the powerful introduction immediately very kind of like radio friendly. I was pleasantly surprised to find like Tumas's keyboards on this song to accompany Floor, and the song is very pleasant but not very original. One of the few that have very traditional verse chorus structure, etc., with inevitably makes it a good single for a promo. And the finale kind of like surprised me a bit because it's a cappella with a very deep voice from Troy. Procession, I can't even say it. Yet this is the song that will certainly have to be listened to many times to catch it, because after listening I didn't manage to understand it or really get into it completely. The introduction sort of gives me pride and sort of like to place like the synth experiments with foreign vocals, and after a minute the drums jointly assemble. Procession is sort of like a little bit of kind of like a half ballad in the sense like this tempo is quite slow compared to the rest of the album. In the middle of the song I was very surprised by sort of like the nice instrumental passage on the piano and the flute. Proves once again that this album multiplies the breaks and rhythms that like to move away from the traditional construction of songs. I would like Floor sort of redone the vocalization in a less advanced style than on Shoemaker, but which is very still pleasant. Anyway, then we move on to Tribal, which is after a particularly calm introduction for about 20 seconds. Choirs accompany the riff, which ends the song, and then Floor goes on with a rather aggressive voice, and the song is super rhythmic and bears in its name as well. It's full of percussion, and Marco and Troy even go far as to launching themselves into like the ooh-ah and the ha. How sort of like very primitive kind of like sounding. And then moving on to the next song on here, which is called Endlessness, which I just think it's a pretty good song. It just actually has like one of the songs where you actually hear Marco sing a little bit more on here, because I'll adjust the CD, but it's mostly just Troy doing most of the vocals, but I feel like Marco's doing a pretty good job on here. I just really like sort of like the song pretty much gains momentum with the orchestrations and a beautiful, magnificent melody. And it's a great way to end this first CD. And then we start with Disc 2, All the Works of Nature Which Adorn the World, the band's longest song ever for record, which is almost 31 minutes long, which this is pretty much why it's considered their Rhyme with the Ancient Mariner, their 6 degrees a minute turbulence. Now this song is kind of like split up into 8 different sections, and let's cover all 8 sections. Now starting things off is Vista, which begins with a speech without music before the orchestration accompanies it. And then we go into the Blue, and with here it goes to straight heart of the subject with an introduction of the show, which extends Vista, and the choice of the instrument immediately makes me think of like something from like credits from like a very epic movie. And the melody is very magnificent and catchy, and is repeated throughout the piece by the cello, choirs, finally the whole orchestra, and that intensity that increases again and again. And then moving on to the Green, which has a change of atmosphere for this track with a soft and clearly contemplative track, and the piano has one of the main roles in the song, which maybe all the piano lines up sort of like, I don't know, but just even the title is still built in, but the crescendo, but there sort of like remains a transition between the Grandiloquent Blue and the title, which will follow. Next, part 4, which is Moors, and I really like sort of like double atmosphere that emerges here. Double because like the first part sort of like immersed me in sort of like kind of like something from like fucking World of Warcraft or some shit, with sort of like a magnificent melody that condensers in here. Here it's particularly refreshing, and then sort of like suddenly the title switches to a more heavier and threatening atmosphere, and then we move on to Aurore, which is the shortest piece of this epic, which would make a nice introduction for the group's future so it's a very dynamic second part with the whole orchestra unleashed. And I feel like this would be a great way to good intro for a good show for them. Anyway, then we get to the next part, which is Quiet as the Snow, which the name of the song sort of like reflects its mood. It's a very soft track where the piano and strings continue to immerse us in the atmosphere. Here in Surprise, Floor sort of like mirrors the title in several languages, including French, which is actually kind of impressive. In the second part of the track, just a closer thing, sort of like, reminds you a little bit like sort of like a keyboard part. Kind of reminds you of something from like Hans Zimmer or something. Anyway, moving on to Anthropocene, which includes sort of like a Huron hymn to Nickel, which the track begins with sort of like many strings, which begins a lot of sound vibrations, and immediately envelop the listener and to make them shiver, and I love it. And then without warning, the song changes its tone to sort of like a melody from something called Huron Hymn to Nickel, which is a song that is to be the oldest song in the world, which is written 3,400 years ago, which is kind of nuts. And then we get to the final part, which is Ad Astra, and this is the fateful moment of the last track of this double album, and after almost 80 minutes, it pretty much concludes human nature, which is the most beautiful way with grandeur. And all this song is very classical music vibe at the beginning. It quite takes an amazing turn in here, and then the orchestra continues to grow, more powerful bursts of instruments and voices, including Floors, hers, and sort of like the most beautiful melodies ever written by Thomas. And the melody completes this fabulous piece that is all the works of nature which adorn the world, which is an astonishing ending. Now overall, Human Nature by Nightwish is a pretty impressive album. I actually like this a lot more than Endless Form's Most Beautiful. If I was going to give this album a score, I'm probably going to give this a solid 9 out of 10. So yep, that's my review of the new Nightwish album, guys. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about it, and I'll see you all in the next video. And as always, keep it metal.